My mom brainwashed me to hate my dad for their divorce, but I found out 13 years later my mom had an affair with his friend while he was in the army. My mom had been married to my dad for 9 years before she cheated and left him for his best friend who is now my stepdad. My father served in the army and his best friend was this rich guy who I saw hanging out with my mom at that time. During the divorce my mom told me that my dad was abusive, controlling and was not there emotionally, so that's why she was leaving him. She told me that my dad treated her badly, called her names and did not love her. At the time I was only 10 years old. My mom got primary custody and dad was stuck paying child support. I only got to see my dad on 2 weekends per month. After that I held some resentment towards my dad. I dreaded when it was time to see him. He had sold what used to be our house, moved back to his hometown, opened a mechanic shop and lived in this shop. He was an avid drinker who always tried to sober up when it was time for me to stay with him. He was miserable, lonely and depressed. He always tried to clean up his house when I went to stay with him even though it still smelled like drinks, gasoline and those car oils. When I turned 15 I started to see him less. I refused to go stay with him and made up excuses, so I only visited him a few times a year. One day I went to visit him without informing him and I found him drinking while watching a football game. He was surprised to see me and he quickly started getting rid of his cans and cleaning his kitchen, asking if I was hungry so that he could order pizza, but I just lashed out at him and told him that's why mom left him, because he was so miserable and couldn't keep his life together. I felt guilty about blowing up on him like that, but I was young and didn't know the full story of my parents' separation. Years went by, until last week I came to visit my mom for the weekend and found out the truth. On Saturday night I overheard my mom and my stepdad talking about what happened 12 years ago, bragging about their affair and not once even regretting how it affected my dad. All they said was that they felt sorry for him. I couldn't help but cry. I wanted to confront her but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I wanted to call her names and insult her, but I didn't have the strength. I was full of mixed emotions but I felt guilty the most. All this time I held a resentment towards my dad, thinking he was the bad guy but he was only the victim of my mom's affair. He never recovered from the affair due to his depression and anxiety issues. And all the time I thought he faked to care about me, he actually genuinely cared for me. And he always tried to stay strong and smile for me. I left the following day and found my dad at his mechanic shop and hugged him. I was crying and he was puzzled and I kept saying sorry repeatedly. When he managed to calm me down I told him everything I learned and I apologized even more. And when I asked why he didn't fight my mom for my custody, he told me that he knew that his depression and anxiety issues, plus his PTSD from time served, would make him unfit to parent in the eyes of himself and the eyes of the court. He never wanted to ruin the relationship between me and my mom, because he knew I loved my mom and his ex-best friend loved me and would take care of me more than he would. He said that it was not my fault and forgave me and he was happy I found out. I want to make it up to my dad but I don't know how. Update. I confronted my mom a few days later after my post and she was defensive at first. She said that I was not grateful for what she did for me, and that she simply protected me from my father. She called him a few names. I didn't want to argue and I had already chosen my next words carefully. I told her that, my father was a good man who was broken by the betrayal of the two people he trusted the most, and you turned his own daughter against him. I appreciate and am grateful for everything, but it's time I choose the parent who puts his own daughter's needs first, even if it means making hard sacrifices, not the parent who wants the daughter to satisfy her own needs. Goodbye mom, I will keep in touch. Before I left tears had been building in her eyes but she just remained silent. She has tried to reach out to me but I just ignore her. I don't block her but my message is loud and clear. My aunt has recently reached out to me and told me that my mom is depressed. Well, her husband can take care of her. I bought an apartment an hour away from my dad's mechanic shop. When I was younger he bought me a Chevy Chevelle SS that my mom convinced me to sell for a Honda Civic, but I decided to rebuy one that was a little messed up and he's been helping me fix it with him. Since I have been around my dad more often he has stopped his drinking habits, but maybe a few drinks and I join him on game nights, but who can blame us?